What's going on, Dragons? Happy Friday. As always, I'm your co-host, Cory, and welcome to episode 35, Triente Cinco of the ERCast, your weekly Friday Night Magic pre-show. Joining me in the Dragon's Den this week, back again, once again, for our first one-on-one episode in like a month, is my boy, Cole. What's going on, Cole?
Hey, Cory, it's great to be back, one-on-one, so we can really deep dive into this thing. Let's tear this one apart like wolves of the night. How?
You're already coming in strong with the ERCast howl?
Yep. Don't think I forgot about that one, so gotta keep it fresh. Keep it hot.
Oh, God. Keep it hot. Ugh. Speaking of hot, pre-release weekend, Modern Horizons 3.
Yeah.
How's this weekend Magic been treating you? Has it been muy caliente? I'm on the Spanish train today, apparently.
I like it. Cory. This weekend was, in terms of Magic, I was like, it's a pre-release weekend. I like to go pick up a pre-release kit, even if I don't get the chance. My schedule doesn't align with the games. Did you know they're selling these things for like an exorbitant price? I was a little bit shooketh when I tried to purchase one. I did get one, but my wallet did take a little bit of a beating. Keep that on the DL. But I pulled some decent cards from my 6-pack, so I'm pleased with it. But overall, I didn't get to play too many games. I was more so just kind of reorganizing some decks, swapping some cards out. We got some, a big couple games this weekend, so I want to make sure all my decks are suited up and booted up. What about you, Cory?
What's funny is, have you ever found one of those weekends where you have a couple chores to go run and you just coincidentally find yourself right next to an LGS on release weekend?
I know those chores.
And I got a couple precons. We ended up getting the Eldrazi precon and the graveyard like Lorgoyf, Tarmogoyf precon.
Nice.
Haven't cracked them open yet. But like you said, the wallet, we're not going to talk about the wallet just yet. I think we'll get into that here in a minute, but
pour one out for the wallets.
Lighter. Yeah, exactly. Pour one out for the wallets. I also had this weird kind of thing that I wanted to talk to you about because it happened to me literally yesterday.
Okay.
Before we've talked about today's episode or anything like that. So yesterday I'm on Scryfall and I'm kind of perusing Planeswalkers.
Sure.
For a project that is unrelated to what we're going to talk about, but I'm perusing Planeswalkers, right?
Yeah.
And I think I'm going to have to build an Oathbreaker deck now.
Oh, you found an interest.
But no. Well, okay. Let me backtrack because that was a harsh no. It's not that I'm uninterested. It's the fact that, and I don't know if you recall this, but last week when we had Ken on, I talked about our friend Rachel and how she wants to have a deck built, and she kind of gave me a bunch of draft chaffy kind of cards, and she wants to build around this one specific kind of like AFR monk, right?
Oh, that garbage uncommon card. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, straight garbage. So I'm looking at just generalized planeswalkers. Like, here's all the planeswalkers. I'm kind of scrolling down them on Scryfall. And I don't know if you're like me, but when you see a card you haven't seen before, I'll click on it. Like, oh, what does this one do? I've never seen this planeswalker. Now, I'm not reading like all 50 Chandras, but if it's like some character I've never seen, I'm going to click on it and look at it, right?
Yeah.
So I see this planeswalker. It's a Bahamut like planeswalker who is a character I've seen before, but it's Grandmaster of Flowers.
Okay.
So I coincidentally click on this thing, never having heard of it before. And let me tell you right now, so it's got 2 abilities, and it can like turn into a dragon and all kinds of weird stuff. But the bottom ability is to search your library or graveyard for a card named Monk of the Open Hand, reveal it, and put it into your hand.
No way.
You know what card, this like garbage draft chaff card that I was trying to shoehorn into a commander deck is?
Uh-huh.
Monk of the Open Hand. Monk of the freaking Open Hand.
What an interesting card there. Otherwise, sounds like some serious draft chaff. But now you're thinking Rachel isn't going to get the commander deck she, quite frankly, doesn't deserve, but rather a Oathbreaker deck.
Yeah, but the problem is none of us in our play group play Oathbreaker, so there's zero support.
Yeah, well. Sometimes if you build it, they will come. It's some Field of Dreams, shenanigans out here.
Yeah. Now, and trust me, we've known each other for years. Have you ever known me to literally jump up and go, I've got to make a TikTok? Because I saw this and I was like, this is the story for a TikTok. I need to make a TikTok. Now I haven't, but I've never been so compelled to make one.
You look out, world. Cory is coming to a TikTok near you. He's going viral.
Lock it down. I'm hitting the clock as we speak. But hey, this week, you guys, we want to sit down and kind of go through Modern Horizons 3, give our hot takes or our not so hot takes. Really depends on how you feel about them. I'm sure some are more sizzling than others. Yeah, they're pretty mid takes. At least mine are mid. But we kind of want to break down the newest sets, tell you guys what we think, what cards you should be taking a hot eye out for, and which cards you should kind of steer clear of. I think the first way we break into this topic is we got to look at the stats, right?
Right.
We got to do the command zone stats. One day.
Soundboard soon.
Yeah, soundboard soon. So we're not going to do a deep dive in the stats, but there are some things we want to throw out there real quick. New cards. Right. We always talk about how big some of these sets are. When you look at a Modern Horizon set, or when we had Commander Masters, obviously reprints are going to be a big portion of this set. Looking at just the brand new cards, we kind of wanted to see what new things were going to get brought to the table. There's 316 brand new cards, never seen before, and 32 brand new commanders to helm up your decks.
Yeah, and they're pretty interesting. So I'm excited, about the variety of this set. A lot of new cards.
I am too, because when I first saw teaser season or spoiler season, and I don't know if this was you, but this was definitely me. I was like, is this a meme set? Because I saw one Eldrazi version after another of existing cards.
Right. Like Null Drifter or,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or the Siege Gang Commander.
Spawn Gang Commander.
Yeah. Yes. So it was just kind of one after another where I was like, is this just an Unfinity Eldrazi set? Like, what am I looking at here? But I will say the more cards and the more different strategies I saw kind of wheel out, the more exciting the set looks.
Yeah, during spoiler season, it was like every bunch of spoilers they drop. I was like, okay, it can't get any stronger. Okay, all right, I was proven wrong. It got stronger. Okay, it can't get any stronger. It was a cycle, and a lot of these cards are printed in cycles. There's some really fun stuff. Tons of good upgrades for pre-existing decks, and then every legend that came out, I think, was at least considered for a moment, being my must build commander of this set. Like so many Eldrazi got such a huge upgrade, and some really interesting new forms too. So I'm shaking like a leaf as I scroll through these spoilers. Not spoilers anymore.
This is definitely
release. When this comes out,
canon.
It'll be release. Yeah.
By the way, can I just ask you another release-based question?
What's up?
Because you've been in the Magic scene longer than I have. Now, when it comes to like Modern Horizon sets or Commander Master sets, what is the point of a pre-release, considering it doesn't go to retail stores? It literally just goes to the LGSs.
Well,
like I'm not walking to a Walmart getting Modern Horizons 3.
Yeah, but gamers are going to game. It's an opportunity to gather. Gamers collectively are stronger. Gamers weak, gamers together strong. You gotta keep in mind also that what's really the difference between Commander Legends and Modern Horizons, because quite frankly, this is looking like Commander Horizons, this set,
Yeah, and that's something I want to get to here in a second, because I'm kind of curious about your opinion, but we'll get there in a second. So a couple other things I want to talk to, or I want to bring up in this set. if you're newer to Magic or if you've been around for a while, there are a couple other changes to some pre-existing card types, stuff like that we're finally seeing unroll or unveil with the set that kind of fall into what Wizards has made their inclusivity kind of mantra for 2024 and 2023. So the big changes is we know that they got rid of the tribal aspect of things pretty much a year ago, I want to say at this point, and things moved into Typal and Kindred. Well, we're finally starting to see those roll out on cards. So we do have some changes as far as like they're now Kindred enchantments or Kindred spells instead of being tribal enchantments or spells.
Yeah, quite frankly, I think it's a positive change. I do prefer Kindred to Typal, so I'm okay with that direction. I know when that was first announced, some people were goofing on it, but it's a cool change, and I'm happy to start actually seeing more Kindred enchantments and that sort of thing come out. I think they kind of stopped printing those for a pretty decent while ago, so it's fun to see that they're basically reintroducing kind of a rare card type.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting on the long run too, because I wonder how many cards could have gotten a reprint but didn't because Wizards was maybe pumping the brakes on that. Maybe we'll see more Bitter Blossoms and things of that nature kind of crop up now that it's not a big of an issue, or that they've started to actually reprint these things with a new card typing.
Right.
And on that same vein too, we did see a new Umbra, which was the Dog Umbra.
Yeah.
And with that, we saw a change from Totem Armor to Umbra Armor.
Yeah. So I think that's also a very welcome change. It's just like old fashioned language that is no need for us to keep it around. And I'm glad that they're kind of addressing and taking a really good look. And I'm sure there's a lot more changes to come in the future, but I think that this is very welcome. Yeah.
Other one I wanted to bring up, and I think these are more for strengthening certain creature types or for setting up for the future. So we did see some other creature types get changed. So Nagas and Viashinos, they no longer exist.
Yeah, that's also pretty cool. It's going to buff up a lot of those older cards that just do not get the same. Yeah, well, I'm sorry. Finish your sentence, because they no longer exist, but they still exist. You can still play those cards, but they might be revamped as a...
Yeah, so for example, Nagas are now snakes. Viashinos are now lizards. I think this is interesting, especially the Naga snakes aspect, right? Because there's definitely a lot of snake support. And I'm curious when we go into Bloomburrow and whatnot if we don't see more too.
Yeah, there's 40 Naga cards, versus snakes that have 153 cards. So they've just now, done a third of the snakes. There's some sort of math equation there, but now they're basically at 200 cards. So it's just a huge buff to any sort of Kindred decks that care about snakes, that want to include Nagas, or janky Naga decks that now actually get some real support.
Yeah, and I think with the lizard aspect too for the Viashinos, I feel like lizards has got to be a move more for the future, whereas snakes might be something that helps fold in a lot of the past.
Wow, that was beautiful.
Thank you. It's one of the few things that I can attribute to this podcast.
Yeah, the lizards, I know they have 143 cards as of now. I wonder if that's actually, now that I'm thinking about it, looking at if they've already been changed on the forum, and that 153 cards already counts the existing 40 Nagas. So I don't know.
I feel like it probably does, but I would still say that snakes had wider support, because you got to figure there's a lot more things like Ophiomancer is not necessarily a snake, but creates snake tokens.
There's a ton of old Kamigawa, snake support like that. Snakes are huge. Lizards, I truth be told, I can't think off the top of my head of that. I can think of a couple of examples of lizards, like Magebane lizard, but I couldn't tell you a piece of specific lizard support.
The only one that I can think of, and it's only now a lizard, is a Viashino Heretic.
Okay.
Which is you tap it. It's a mono red card, but you tap it to destroy an artifact, and then you deal damage to the artifact's controller equal to its CMC.
And what does that have to do with lizards?
It's now a lizard. That's what it has to do with lizards.
Okay. Well, very interesting.
But moving on from there, let's do what we do best, and that is talk Commander.
Woo.
So even though this sucker is Modern Horizons 3, it came with 4 Commander decks.
Yeah, and they're all pretty. They're all good. Wawa has pizza. Like they're pretty fun.
Yes. So I want to look at the Commander decks real quick. Not necessarily break down all the commanders, but kind of let's look at what they do. I want your opinion on it at the end, and what do you think speaks to you? I think they all are good, but I think some of them have more potential than others in the long grand scheme of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're all like unique decks. They kind of play off of themes that we've seen recently. Like, not to spoil it too much, but there we have a new energy deck and we have an Eldrazi deck, which we saw toward last year with the Ultimate Masters and the Thunder Junction sets, both released respectively. Those style of commander decks. Obviously, we always see good old fashioned ramp, and then a graveyard deck is welcome. It's a good spread, and I think as far as new players go, maybe not price tag not included here. They seem really good for newer players. They're a great bunch of cards.
So the 4 decks. So we have Creative Energy, which is your Jeskai energy deck.
Oh yeah.
We have Graveyard Overdrive, which is a graveyard. I don't even want to say it's a recursion deck because it's recursion without actually going to the graveyard, I guess.
Okay.
We have Eldrazi Incursion, which is interesting because I think it might be the first time we've seen a 5-color plus waste symbol on a precon package.
Definitely.
And we have Tricky Terrain, which is I don't know what you would call this, like a changeling deck.
It's Simic weird stuff, as normal, as per usual.
Now, of the 4 of them, which one do you think is which one tickles your fancy the most, and which one meh?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's something to say about all these decks. They all have unique face commanders. They have unique backup commanders. They have fun new cards. They have great reprints. Personally, when I'm like buying a commander deck, like a precon, there's 2 ways that you look at it. Obviously, like one way, you might not ever change it and just keep it directly as is. And then the other way is like I'm a deck that I'm looking to rip all the cards out of and rebuild from the ground up, or rip 20 cards out and put my little upgraded spin on it. And so for me, I mean, honestly, I think the Graveyard Overdrive, which is the deck you mentioned in this week in Magic, this episode, the Lurgoyf, tribal or kindred. Scratch that, cut that out of the audio. Lurgoyf kindred deck. It's got some really great cards in it, and it honestly, other than having a less than ideal land base, it looks like just a very fun pile of Jund. So personally, that's the one that I'm kind of interested in. The Eldrazi one has such interesting new cards and very cool. Like you said, it's it's a 5-color deck, so you have something for everybody. But it's got just some very interesting new cards. They gave Eldrazi a lot of love. And personally, the deck that I would kind of not, I'm not too crazy about, but it's certainly for somebody, is the Tricky Terrain deck. Looking at everything counters, I'm like, it's a lot to keep track of, which I'm sure your deck building skills can be put to the test with this. But having already a kind of a unique Simic deck in the form of Volo that cares about like avoiding creature types and doubling up, like my space for Simic is Simic weird stuff specifically is kind of full right now. So leave a message and I'll get back to you later.
Yeah, no, I think I kind of agree with you. So for me, like I said in the beginning, I went Graveyard Overdrive and Eldrazi Incursion. My thought was that I would take the Eldrazi and Sharon would take the Graveyard Overdrive, but
Uh-huh.
she really kind of swapped that on me the second I walked through the door. So I guess I'm in
Oh,
Graveyard Overdrive and she's taking the Eldrazi.
wow. Well, that'll be a sight to behold. Interesting little power swap. I definitely feel like she, after playing a lot of that Gisa and Geralf zombie deck, that she would have loved a new spin on graveyards.
Now, I don't know if this is me. This might be you as well. And I love to say this every time I throw out my hot take, but
To shift the
I
blame
kinda,
onto me.
exactly. So we're both in cahoots. It's not just a solo operation here. I kind of like the backup commander on every single one of these more than the actual commander.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
This is that classic, you look at the deck and you go, okay, 65% of this deck synergizes better with the face commander, but the backup commander does something cool or unique that is inherently easier to bust.
Yeah, like I mean, I think a lot of these are just obvious auto swaps, and you can play around with and try them out for both, but particularly with the graveyard one, I think like Quorum just it provides for a much more unique, like you have very unique options with these commanders. Like you can swap from being a Lurgoyf deck to a generally playing cards from your opponent's decks. The Eldrazi one is also a pretty impactful change. So
Yeah,
I like that they're giving you these options.
Annihilator.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm. Well, so looking at the Eldrazi, because that was the one that intrigued me the most. Like I was the most excited to see that one because I actually don't have an Eldrazi deck.
Do you
I
have
thought
an
about
experience
Zuladan.
counters deck? Yeah, you do, but it's
I do have an experience counters deck.
I know you do. Oh, the little blue guy,
Yeah,
green.
yeah, Zuri.
He cares about little
Yes,
blue
I have
guys,
a.
little green guys.
He does. He cares about little blue guys. But with the Eldrazi deck, it seemed like the most intriguing to me is something. Oh, okay, this is a new thing to slot into my library, my
Yeah.
rotation.
Yeah.
I would almost argue that face commander is got to be the most obtuse for a new player
You got
because
to keep track of
manipulates
so
the
many
stack.
things. Yeah,
Yeah, and it
maybe
manipulates the stack so much.
we should maybe just read it out loud once. If you don't understand it, just play it back, rewind 15 seconds, maybe 30 seconds with how long this thing is.
I'm not gonna. I don't have it in front of me. I don't necessarily know we need to read it, but essentially, it copies. If you have it in front of you,
I got it
tell
in
me if
front
I'm
of me.
right or wrong.
Okay,
Copies. It copies
Wrong.
each Eldrazi spell and triggered ability.
No. Well,
Yes.
kind of. You got some stuff, but it also has activated abilities, and it's whenever you cast an Eldrazi spell, you get the opportunity to pay to colorless like waste symbols essentially, and then if you do, you copy all spells you control. So not only just Eldrazi's, and then you copy all activated and trigger abilities you control, and then you can choose new targets.
See. Too complex. I think anything that manipulates the stack is too and I don't want to sound condescending to new players or anything. Every time I look at a new player, they are smarter than I have given them credit for in a previous instance.
Well,
but
that's a great thing to notice. It seems that the gene pool is rising.
it's like that bad movie Idiocracy, but in reverse, where it's just they're getting smarter and smarter. I just think that anytime you manipulate the stack, it becomes this very amorphous thing because it's something that even experienced players kind of struggle with grasping until they're deeper into their Magic career. Now, the backup commander, now that really tickles an itch for me. That scratches an itch, tickles my fancy, however you want to put it, because
it swells your scourge.
Yes, because I could stack Annihilator counter or Annihilator triggers. And that just seems fun.
Yeah, you can pay Wooburg and give your creatures Indestructible and Annihilator 1. And they also get a not negligible +X until end of turn, where X is the number of experience counters you have. So it's undeniably a win con, especially if you have infinite mana. It's a cool card. It only costs 3, so it's coming out early. I like it a lot. Azlask, the Swelling Scourge.
The Graveyard Overdrive one, I think, is fun. I think it's graveyard decks, it seems like a staple strategy to put in. The Energy deck, My concern is my concern with the energy deck is this. It seems like a very straightforward game plan. Like, hey, you bring out creatures, you can pay energy to kind of keep them around, otherwise they
Right.
go away. My concern is with upgradability because energy has some very busted things you can do with it, but it doesn't have a broad card pool like a graveyard deck has a very broad card pool you can pull from, or a landfall-y, Simic weird stuff deck has a broad card pool you can pull from.
Or like a lizard deck has a broad card pool.
Lizards everywhere you look. So that's my only concern there. Now that backup commander also seems like it could be busted. So that one essentially can populate or proliferate, and it gives it comes with, was it like modular one or something?
It gives them all fabricate one, and you can pay two and populate or proliferate. Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think that they obviously don't print energy cards every set because people would riot. It's energy was really huge in Kaladesh or like an Aetherflux and that sort of thing. And then they've done a little bit in the past. They did a little bit with, and I think in Fallout had some, but it's got a more limited card pool. But the deck itself, I think, is a really fun theme. You get the energy off of him as well, off of Satya. So if you do choose to keep the face commander, it kind of just feels like a blink, or essentially a little bit of a doubler effect on your best ETBs. And I think overall the reprint value of that deck, it provides some like really strong cards to newer players. You got your Goldspan Dragon, Professional Facebreaker, and then another reprint of Akroma's Will. So I'm like, honestly, this deck could probably beat the crap out of a lot of my older, less refined decks.
And then let's talk tricky terrain here for a second. What the hell is this deck? Like, I get it. I get the deck. I get that it's Simic weird stuff. I both hate to see the deck, and I feel like I would hate to play against the deck because it looks like it would be damn near impossible to interact with if you're going the route of throwing stuff on your lands and go like, oh, look how many deserts I have now. Look how many caves I have. And look how many gates I have.
Yeah. And when you say it like that, it actually, I think, does sound pretty cool because it gives a lot of those, strategies, like cards that care about how many caves you have, and caves only just having coming out in the, it was the Ixalan set that that those dropped. Yeah. So it's like you don't have too many options, but maybe you really liked caves. Maybe you grew up in a cave, and it's like you just want to play a cave deck. It's like now you can. Gates. Gates are another thing. Like it's just a ton more support for and usually when you're playing gates, you need at least like 3 to 4 to 5 colors to be able to realistically and consistently get your 10 gates on the field. But with Omo, this might open up the world for Simic gates, which Simic is in dire need of some fresh new strategies other than draw cards and put cards onto the battlefield, or ramp draw cards. Yeah.
But what's funny is you say a new strategy, but it's sort of like, I don't want to say a perversion of a current strategy, right? But Simic is such a ramp, landfall, ramp, draw, landfall, ramp, draw. This one is kind of land based as well, but in a way that's not necessarily getting me more land. It's just getting me stranger lands.
Well, and you can make some, crazy things happen with that power. Like it's a deck that I think will have a forever ability to it, because everything is going to apply to all new creature types that come out, all new land types. It'll be a deck that you'll always be able to find something new or find some new gimmick, or if you get bored of it, kind of just flip the script and again just turn it into a lizard deck. That's kind of the main takeaway from MH3.
Everything's a lizard now.
Well, everything can be.
I have a question for you. So you're a commander player. I'm a commander player. We don't necessarily venture into other formats as much. I think we've tried other formats, right? Like you've played 60 card games before, but it's not necessarily our forte. It's not something we're doing on a daily basis.
Yeah, absolutely.
How if you're a modern player, if you're like modern is your jam, modern is what you do, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, modern. How do you feel that they're putting commander decks out in modern? Does it feel like they're taking away your set?
No, I mean, like personally, like you said, I am definitely a much bigger commander player than I am a modern player. But okay. Like the mindset should be get more people into Magic. I think that's always that's what I'm going to default to. So if you are like upset about something that the goal is to be accessible to newer players or to like intrigue people, you know, I get the ads on my Reddit. I'm not gonna say it's working, but I did spend almost a crazy amount of money on a pre-release, you know, package, so it somewhat worked. But it's trying to get newer players in, and so I would always default to it's a good thing.
I agree with you in that sense. Like, I'm all for more Magic. More Magic means more players, means more
people you can destroy.
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear it. I got lightning going on now. We got the storms rolling in.
Oh, it hasn't started over here. So I like to think that my calling of destruction summoned that storm.
Probably. Now, what I am saying though is that if I was a hardcore modern player, it's almost like you're getting rid of modern being the focus of the set, because I feel like, and maybe this is just the circles that you and I navigate in, I feel like it's almost being pushed as, like we joked, Commander Horizons 3. Like, you're seeing more stuff about this could be great in Commander, that's a great in Commander, this impacts Commander.
Right. I mean, I think it's I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine that Commander is probably the fastest growing format. And so it's always going to be a element of like they can make money off of it. They're going to print stuff for it, and quite frankly, at least it feels unique enough, and it's, you know, I would imagine that this is going to be a very fun modern set. Playing with energy counters is always like enjoyable, and there's a ton of, you know, new cards for all formats. There's even obviously I don't know if you've heard kind of the discourse about Cranial Ram, which is like a common equipment that got printed and then banned before it even got released for a format called Pauper, where all the cards are common. And they do have Pauper EDH, where, you know, you have an uncommon as your commander. And it followed the pattern of another card, All That Glitters. And I was like, well, why did they print Cranial Ram at common level if it's going to absolutely just be so warping for this format that they clearly were not considering when they designed the card? And so I think they get kind of lost in the sauce about Commander, but the product is strong cards that are going to, you know, see they're built to be used. Like they're going to be used in a format, whether or not it's modern. And I think that in general raises the card quality. Yeah, and I completely agree on that front. What's funny is Cranial Ram, I actually was looking at, and I was like, you know, this wouldn't be too bad in Commander. No, it's going straight into my Zergo, you know, Helm Smasher equipment deck. It's like it's Living Weapon on All That Glitters. So it's like it's arguably even stronger because it gets around having to have a creature in the first place. And then, you know, obviously, like All That Glitters, it goes hard with the artifact lands. So it's just it's a powerful card. I understand why they need to get rid of it. Yeah, now, one other thing I want to talk about on the Commander deck side of things before we move into the main chunk. Now, this is something that's been sort of a Wizards of the Coast business strategy, I guess, for the last couple sets, but this is the first time it's really impacted me, I'll say. So I want to talk about it for 2 seconds. The lack of MSRP for product. So MSRP, for those of you guys who don't know, is like the recommended sales price. Yeah. For product. So, you know, when you go and sell, let's say Wizards used to sell all these decks to Walmart, Target, whomever, they would sell it to them at, let's just say, $10 or something. They would go, okay, now we recommend that you sell it for $39.99 or whatever the cost is. The same for video games, stuff like that. You know, they sell these games to Best Buy, GameStop, wherever for their price, and they go, okay, and you're gonna put it on shelves for $69.99. Sounds like they're making a killing. So yeah, exactly. Now they've gotten rid of MSRP. The thought process is it makes all the decks kind of fair market value, right? Like nobody wants to buy the deck,
So all these places are going to start lowering prices, and you can foreseeably get tricky terrain at a rock bottom price if nobody buys it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Now, what my experience was when I went to go get these precons is sort of the opposite. So I walked in and there were 3 decks that were in like the $50 to $60 range, and then one deck that was $130.
Which one did they buff up? The Eldrazi?
The Eldrazi. This was the first time, like I said, I've experienced this, but I kind of wonder, and I'm kind of concerned about how this might play out in the long run, because it can't necessarily be great for LGSs either, because they're kind of guessing at what they sell things at, right? Like it's a benefit for them when the prices go up and there are more like Eldrazi decks or slivers or something that's going to really generate a lot of interest. But when you have that offbeat deck, like, hey, 3 of them are great, but that 4th one I bought, a quarter of my inventory in, and it just craters because nobody wants this deck. I don't see how that's great for their bottom line.
Well, it's not about the bottom line. It's about, at the end of the day, it definitely is. They're a profit-driven company. But, and like you mentioned with the Commander Masters or those sort of like kindred decks, the fact was that those decks were also marketed as kind of like elite Commander decks. And so I'm sure were sold for for much more money to those retailers, and so they had to increase the the baseline prices. And then you end up seeing a lot of these like 5 months from now or 5 years from now, somebody will be like, oh, look at what I got for $5 at Walmart, and it's like a pallet full of the underplayed like Wilhelt the Rock Cleaver or something, which is like a fine deck and has very reasonable reprint value, but it just like people are not buying it. So, you might happen to stumble upon 20 of them for $40. Obviously, that's not the math. I'm just freestyling that. So
no, I completely understand what you're saying, because that was a story I remember seeing like 8 and 9 months ago where people were walking into Costco and they were finding like repackaged commander decks from like 2019, 2018, or they were finding like the Tulane Brawl deck and stuff like that for it's $20, with 2 of them packaged together, and you're like, wait. This deck maybe doesn't have the greatest reprint value, but it's got some busted cards in there.
Yeah, I've been impressed, and it's kind of a cool wild west of that sense of like you could hit the jackpot. My biggest regret one day is I went into a Target and saw a box, a little clear box that had a card, just a pack of like cellophane wrapped cards in it, and then on the front they had a mana crypt, and I was like, it was like $100. I was like, I'm not buying that. And then, Mana Crypt shot up in price also. And I was like, you find some weird gems at a Target sometimes.
And what's funny is, that example there, those repacked like bulk buy bundle things are like notorious for being the worst bang for your buck imaginable too. The fact that it's just advertising a Mana Crypt right up front.
They were also
really
charging
makes me wonder what else is there.
yeah. I don't imagine there would have been much else other than that.
So I mean that was mostly my thought. I think the lack of MSRP, I have concerns about it, but I think I need to wait and see how a couple more sets go before I really cast judgment. I'm also not an LGS, so I can't really speak too much for their bottom line, but I think that would be my biggest concern is like, how does this impact the mom and pop LGS? Because they're not necessarily going, well, I'm only stocking Eldrazi Incursion because it's going to go up, and I can't stock the other 3 decks because they're going to stay, at a mid price point.
Yeah, and if it does, there's a little bit of supply and demand. You can always turn to online, retailers, not to support the JB himself, but which could be Justin Bieber, but I'm also unfortunately referring to Jeff Bezos.
I don't know who you're talking about. You mean Pitbull? Is that who we're talking about?
JB?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he spent his fortune stealing Pitbull's identity, because I see him bald and dancing around Miami in silk attire these days.
Whoa. Good roast. Yeah, but overall, I think it's a good set of unique decks. I think it's gonna be fun to pick them up. I'm I'm probably going to be building a lot of the non precon commanders, but that you do you know.
All right. Yeah, no, fair enough. I think when I look at it, a lot of the backup commanders speak to me, but they're probably not the ones that I'm going to go and lock in a deck with the most, right? Like I do like the backup commander from the Eldrazi, and that's probably the most likely one for me to have a deck out of the face and backup of those 8, I guess, cards. But I think the one I'm going to build a deck out of is most likely going to come from the main set. Speaking of the main set, we do have some exciting returns. And I'm not talking about reprints, but I'm talking about the return of the Flipwalker, Cole.
Yeah. So obviously those are kind of the biggest 5 legends that I think people are, looking at in terms of they're unique. They're baby walkers is what I, used to call them. I have a Liliana deck that is the Liliana Heretical Healer. Flips into a flip walker, if you will. But there are 5. They're all really cool characters: Ral, Sorin, Grist, Ajani, and Tamio. And quite frankly, they are fun, low mana drops that all have unique effects. And when they flip into planeswalkers, have pretty strong effects. So I would imagine that you're going to start seeing a lot of these popping up at your local game stores, but they're definitely a little on the pricier side as of right now, with not too much, too many things being opened.
Yeah, I also like them in the sense that they all seem to be relatively easy to flip, which is one of the things I liked about the original set. I know you run a Liliana, like you said, a real Liliana Heretical Healer, and that one flips off of what? Just having a single creature die?
Non-token creature die, yes.
Sure. But then you get a pretty decent Planeswalker out of it. Now, these ones here, they've got different conditions. So, for example, like Grist has to come out of the graveyard or something in order for it to flip. Sorin is what? You have to gain 3 life, I think.
You have to gain 3 life.
Relatively easy.
Sack of food,
Yeah, sack of food, or, it has extort on the front of it. So you get one extort trigger and you go flip. Tamio is draw 3 cards, which I've already seen people bust with turn 1, but just by going island, Lotus Petal, tap the island for Tamio, use the Lotus Petal for 1 blue mana, and then go brainstorm, draw 3 cards, and go, well, turn 1 flip.
Yeah, and that's, they're not all super busted on the back. Like, I do think Tamio has, although an easy flip condition, it's like at the end of the day, if you have low CMC creatures, hopefully you're able to, beat them back into submission, and they're not casting them for, a little bit if everybody gangs up on them. So if they end up looking problematic, I would just take a deeper look at your opening game. Like, are you putting down those little 1/1, 2/1 first strikers, that sort of thing? Make some money moves.
Yeah, what's funny is I've heard a couple people rank them already. Maybe this will just make me question my ability to assess cards. But I feel like my personal assessment is almost the opposite of what I've seen a lot of people assess. Okay. So I've been seeing a lot of people rank Tamio and Tamio and Ryle really high, and then Sorin and Grist pretty low, and then like a Johnny in the middle. And I'm looking at it going, Tamio is really contingent on you getting the ultimate, right? Where I have like half my library in my hand, because the +1 ability of like debuffing or nerfing attacking creatures, for me anyways,
Yeah, I mean, Sorin has an ability where you can deal damage equal to the life you've gained this turn, which with any combination of like Grey Merchant of Asphodel or any of the, opponent loses half their life total, you gain that much life. Like, it is a lethal weapon. It can definitely kill, and you can put in, trigger doublers or like activated ability doublers and double up on that, and I'm certain that Sorin is going to be pretty strong. Ral obviously is kind of built on like his front. You have to cast. He ramps you. He reduces the cost of your instants and sorceries, but he also has a little bit of a random flip condition where you have to win a coin flip. Which if you play like I do, you might never flip him. But his minus ability on his like ult when he flips is casting instants and sorceries from your top 8 cards of your library for free, like that's just an instant win in the right deck, especially if you can kind of manipulate the cards on the top. So I'm also maybe a little biased because I pulled a Ral and he's definitely going in my Gandalf deck, but I do not think that he is to be underestimated.
No, I don't think he's bad, but I think what I don't understand is the people that are like lowballing Sorin and Grist into like the 4th and 5th place, because for me, I think those are probably the 2 strongest ones. Like I see Sorin, even if you flip Sorin, he has Extort on a Planeswalker, which seems good. Like seems like it would be super useful with the rest of his ability to, like you said, you can down tick, which is not his ultimate, by the way. It's just one of his down ticks. You can down tick to alpha strike somebody for all the life you gained.
Yeah, and at that point, you're killing the strongest player at the table, and so you just wheedle your way down. You probably have like a built-in Soul Sisters, or like you want creatures to enter so you can gain life, and then maybe like Aristocrats to complement it. It's like it's a deck that builds itself. It's not really doing anything super new, but it's a fun vampire life gain deck. So catch me outside.
The only thing that I'll tell you I don't like about Sorin, or I don't know how I feel about Sorin. So there's 2 prints, right? Of all of these. There's like Sorin edgy, like Edge Lord, Sephiroth Sorin, I guess I'll call him.
The best one where he looks like an anime guy.
Yeah, the best one where he looks like an anime guy, as opposed to the one where he looks like child Maximilian Pegasus.
Yeah.
Like that's the best I can describe him.
No, I definitely a lot. If you look at the prices of these cards, of the artistic flipwalkers are definitely at exorbitant prices if you're looking to get one. But I like them a lot. I think they're cool, and so I might proxy one, to be honest with you.
Other returns, obviously, we saw the return of the Eldrazi Titans. So we've got a new Kozilek, Ulamog, and Emrakul.
Yeah,
they seem fair.
Yeah, they're big Eldrazi. I like them. I personally, anytime if you're playing that as a commander, you see it from a mile away, but sometimes they're ramping into it really quick. You got the ward, sacrifice 2 permanents, and on like really powerful on cast triggers. The one that's kind of problematic, I think, is, and it's not problematic, I'm just saying that I know at the end of the day it costs 12 mana and it's not going to be easily cast, but it's the Emrakul, the World of New, that gains control of all creatures target player controls, and when he leaves the battlefield, sacrifices all creatures you control. The madness effect there, you might end up seeing that in a lot of madness decks. Like it's a pretty powerful effect, but overall, I'm like, the fact that it's on cast, gain control of all the target creatures. So if you do end up like not letting it enter the battlefield, your creatures are already gone. I'm like,
yeah, I mean, I already see this as you cast it, snag the best army, and then when you're ready to leave, you find a way to bounce it to your hand, then you discard it, use the madness to bring it out, take the next best army at the time. It's like alpha strike board wipe for one person over and over again. Like if you can loop that with like a conjuring closet or something, good God.
Well, Conjuring Closet, you can't blank it. It's on cast, and
sure, right. But what I mean is, like, if you had a way to blink it just to blow up their board, if you're like, I just want to take this, and then on my end step, I want to blow up your board, I could Conjuring Closet, to pop somebody's stuff.
Yeah, you could, but I mean, when it leaves the battlefield, you sacrifice all the creatures you control. So I'm just like, I would think it's pretty built. It's pretty, and also it has protection from spells and from permanents that were cast this turn. So it's like that thing, you might as well just keep the board of creatures, especially if you have a way to like remove it at instant speed, like a Viscera Seer or something like that. You just get more value out of like casting it and keeping the creatures, unless obviously somebody like Homeward Paths. But if you have Viscera Seer, not a problem. So,
you know what this would be interesting in though? Speaking of like Viscera Seer, if you had like an Edict kind of deck, with like your Grave Packs or your Dictated Erebos,
Yeah.
And you went, okay, well, I'm leaving and I'm going to, kill the 5 other things I have. All right, everybody go sacrifice 5 creatures.
Yeah. Overall, Eldrazi got like the biggest buff out of any other type this set. And so like if whether or not you're just putting these guys in your deck, and quite frankly, you shouldn't be putting too many of these guys in your deck, because like 99% of the time they're just going to be chaff in your hand. Like if you get a 12 mana spell in your opener, you're like, okay, just give me a couple turns, give me 12 turns, and I'm going to start changing the game up. Like I don't think these are going to see nearly as much play as I would fear.
No, because the old ones don't, right? The old ones, they see play, but in specific decks. Like you're either playing a ninja deck, either it's Yuriko, so you want to go and flip some Eldrazi off the top to hit everybody for a bunch of damage, or it's like Satoru Umezawa, so you give that thing ninjutsu, or you're playing some kind of like cheat in big creature deck with like a Elvish Piper or something like that, where you go, all right, I tap you and I'm gonna just cheat something in from my hand without paying the mana cost.
Right.
If you're paying 12 mana, you've built it wrong.
Well, we'll see, but I don't think you're going to see anywhere near as many of these Titans as you are the flipwalkers.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think that mirrors, like I said, the past, because you don't see as many of those Titans as you do see some of the flipwalkers as well. Talking about like other new cards, so we talked about the Eldrazi, we talked about the flipwalkers. There are some exciting kind of cycles as far as like there's a new cycle of free spells. There's some new like cycling.
All right. As far as like impact on commander goes, a lot of these, the cards that are not legends are going to have like a way stronger impact. And like you mentioned, it's going to be those free spells. Like everybody loves free. I mean, if you like me, you hate free spells.
Everybody loves Raymond.
Everybody loves free spells. So there's like a whole flare cycle that cares about you sacrificing creatures of their respective color and getting like a pretty strong effect. Your generic free spell value, color wheel. Like, so you got your blue counters, your green ramps, your black is creature removal, white is like a protection spell, red is the red one, and they're pretty strong. But I personally I really like about this set is the inclusion of all the new lands, and new and old lands. I personally, out of my pre-release kit, the best thing I got was like 2 fetch lands. I love getting fetches because it means I can slip them into my other decks. But like if I was a newer player that might not want to really allocate any of my money towards like buying fetches, this set seems to be pretty filled with them. But they take the wayside compared to the MDFC lands. A new class of lands called bolt lands, because they deal 3 damage to you if you choose to let them come in untapped. But on the opposite side is a rather relevant spell. So like if you need these untapped, they come in untapped, and otherwise the effects that they have are like pretty ubiquitous, and I think are going to find that they're the most played cards from MH3 because they can be swapped into literally any deck.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So I like the MDFCs. I also find some of the lesser seen, like you said, the non-legendary cards, even some of the non-mythics and non-rare cards seem like they're going to have a good impact on certain strategies. We talked about Cranial Ram being pre-banned in Pauper, but I can't see that being a decent kind of spell in the right equipment deck or a treasure strategy for Rakdos, stuff like that. I'm also excited for, I believe it's Marionette Apprentice.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically Marionette Master, but for 1, it's like a common version instead. There's also, and I see if I can find it or remember its name, there is also a new Fleshbag Marauder that is 1 in a black instead of 2 in a black.
Yeah.
And usually those are those like incremental changes where you go, oh, this is Fleshbag Marauder, but slightly better because it's 1 in a black and lets you do planeswalkers and creatures that lets you like gradually do power creep. So you don't see huge leaps and bounds, but you see these improvements over time. And that's why you see decks that were like hub stompy decks 5 years ago come out and they're just not as optimized now because you haven't touched them in so many years.
Like there's a new, I mean, a lot of the old stuff got reprinted under new names. And so you see like a couple of cards that were reserved list, like Gilded Drake that got a new form, and like the, whatever Storm Drake, and the Nightmare, the enchantment that allows, it's like a recurring Nightmare copy. But as far as cards that aren't like that crazy, but still pretty crazy, there's Ugin's Binding, which returns a non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand for 3 mana. But then whenever you cast a colorless spell CMC 7 or greater, you can exile it from your graveyard and return each non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand. They just straight up reprinted Cyclonic Rift for large mana colorless decks. So like they've opened up a lot of strategies and obviously Ugin's Binding is blue as well. So it's like, oh boy, another blue Cyclonic Rift. Not that it would fit in any other color, but also the card is devoid, so it has no color, but there's just straight up upgrades in this. Like you're gonna find cards that you want to swap in if you buy a pack. Don't do it. Don't buy a pack. Don't spend money on this. But you if you do, they're pretty good.
Oh yeah. No, even like the new Eldrazi Panharmonicon enchantment. We hear complaints pretty much every time they do this about like, oh, another Panharmonicon. This one does attacks, or this one does damage, or this one does ETBs or LTBs or whatever, right? Now they've made a colorless one, and it looks like it could be good. And we actually grabbed that on one of the packs we opened this weekend. And I'll tell you what, if I do end up building that Eldrazi backup commander, having double Annihilator triggers seems juicy.
Well, I pulled it too, so we'll go ahead and two-headed giant somebody with I'll pull out the Zuladoc, make something happen.
Yeah, just go get nasty. So I mean, I think that's more or less our thoughts on the matter. Now, reprints, we kind of put this towards the back end of the episode. There's a good amount of reprints in here as well. There's a lot of exciting stuff that you don't necessarily suspect. One of my favorite things that I've seen, and I'm kind of curious what you have seen out there as well, is medallions are finally getting reprinted. They got reprinted in Commander Masters, sure. But when I first started playing Commander and I got to the point of like, oh, I'm going to go build my own decks, I remember a lot of those medallions, especially Sapphire, which is the blue one, being like $30-$40. And now with this second reprint in less than a year, we're seeing a lot of them trending down to $5, $2.50. Like they've taken a big hit with this new set.
Yeah, I love medallions. I actually also pulled a ruby medallion from my pre-release set, so I was hyped to get to pull one of those. But like you said, it's like they're cards that you wouldn't have had access to if you started playing a long time ago. Like in the commander decks as well, one that I noticed was Mana Reflections in the Tricky Terrain deck, which are like back in the day, I have an Enchantress deck that you can actually see me destroy with on John's last stream on Chaotic Commander. But I bought a Mana Reflections for maybe like $40, like you said, and now it's just sticking it in a precon. It's a precon card, along with Apex Devastator, I might add, and Dryad of Elysian Grove, which are all cards that at some point or another have been like $20+. So
no, I think it's very exciting. I definitely think that the Tricky Terrain deck, even though it's got maybe the weirdest kind of theme around it, it definitely has some real juicy reprints. I mean, even some of the lands, because it's got like Vesuva's in there. I think it's got a Thespian Stage. It's got decent lands that you don't necessarily see every single set.
Yeah, it's a lot of really powerful lands. I mean, obviously, like the issue with most of these precons, but like when they come out, is that the land base is so filled with tapped lands. But these have some good ones, and I think like Tricky Terrain is a deck that you could very easily push in the direction of trying to get your merit log tokens and that sort of thing. So Vesuva and all those kind of push that in that general direction too. So it's cool that they're giving you giving these strong cards away, but also I'm like, I spent $20 on a Vesuva back in 2017. Don't fact check that.
Now, I guess final thoughts here, so we can kind of get into the wrap up of the conversation. What do you think the long term impact of Modern Horizons 3 is going to be? Are we talking comparable to Modern Horizons 2, which I would argue was probably one of the defining sets of Commander in the last 5-10 years? Or are we talking more aftermath, where it's got cool cards, but people tend to forget it existed?
No, I mean, I think undeniably, with the amount of lands that they've printed in this set, like the bolt lands, I'll stand on that those are definitely game changing enough. And the fact that there's like 20 of them, it's those cards are going to see more play than any other set combined. Like you can take any of these, they have fight spells, tutors, auras, removal, card draw, and like counter spells, all for the price of a potentially or like a choiceably untapped land if you so choose. So I would think that this set is going to have some of the most like commander playable uncommons. It's every pack you're getting at least something that you're like, oh, I could slip that into a deck. So definitely more so than Modern Horizons 2, which was a great set, but didn't have lands like this.
Yeah, I think with this, what's interesting is when you look at standard sets, look at Thunder Junction or Karlov Manor.
Right.
Like, you look at the commons, and a lot of the commons and even the uncommons are built in this vacuum for people that are going to play limited. Hey, I'm going to go draft Thunder Junction, and this card's good in Thunder Junction draft limited format, or it might impact standard a little bit, but it's not going to change my commander deck in any way. Whereas this, because it's going strictly to modern and strictly into commander, you see, I think, a lot more of a trickle down effect where every card might not be for every deck, but there's a deck out there for each one of these cards.
Well, and like newer, like, I play an energy deck and I haven't had any new upgrades and that are real good since Fallout, but before that, like years. It's like, oh, well, you have so many new upgrades now, like the Necro Bloom, which kind of just changed the game for Abzon Landfall, and stuff like there's new Blink cards. Like every major theme, or at least the vast majority of like played deck themes, has gotten a new set of wheels, or like you could absolutely change it up and include a new legend as your commander. Just try it out. Like a lot of the stuff is just straight up good, looks fun, and it feels intriguing, which is like, you don't get that every set. Some sets you can just let the spoilers pass by and you're like, I don't even feel the urge to really, give these a second look. But regardless of if you're interested in this set, you have to admit that a lot of these cards are just plain upgrades, like the M Skier upgrading, Bosch, like giving it affinity and an extra color and a card draw effect. Like you just can't beat that.
No, I think you're absolutely right. Especially like you brought up the Necro Bloom. Even that right there, you look at it and you go, so I could have a legendary creature version of Field of the Dead,
right?
Just sitting right around, huh? And that's without even looking at the dredge or anything like that.
Yeah, dredge players rejoice. You finally are, got some new content too.
So I guess to end up, unless you have any other final thoughts, I think now is the time for us to discuss our must-build commanders.
Yeah, so final thoughts. It's a fun but expensive set. I'm excited to see the impact of the cards. If you buy any MDFCs and you don't want them, you can send them to our PO box and I will eat them for you.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think this is going to be a set where even if you don't see an impact on it today, you're going to see an impact on it down the line, right? Like you're going to see stuff where a year, 2 years down the line, they release some new commander that's going to breathe life into some cards you forgot about from this set. I think you're going to find a lot of synergy pieces that are going to impact a lot of deck building choices for a while to come. Now, the last time we picked must build commanders, Cole, you got to put yourself back in that mindset. That was not Fallout, not OTJ, but Karlov Manor.
Wow. It's been a little while.
So
Then.
at the time, now just to remind everybody, so must build commander is not necessarily what everyone should build, but it's the ones that we felt was most likely to make it into our individual deck rotations due to just our enjoyment for the card or things we felt filled a void in our rotations, stuff like that. The last time, Cole, you said that you would at this point have a Voja Jaws of the Conclave.
Oh man, was I wrong? And I'm glad.
What happened? Did Reddit scare you off?
No, yeah, I mean, it's not Reddit. It's the Twitter discourse. It's the I haven't been unfortunate enough to play against it, but it's unabashedly a very strong deck. It's getting the same kind of discussions that Miriam sees, but I think this one are much stronger than Miriam. It's a win con in the command zone, which is always fair, but this one also just draws you so much, and it also has a ward for no reason. Everybody hates it. I would feel bad putting it down, and inevitably I would have had to shamefully change my commander by now. So I'm out on that one.
Yeah, I jumped on this boat too. This was a bandwagon that I was like, oh, this card looks so cool. It looks sweet during spoiler season. And then, yeah, when I saw the discourse too, I was like, you know what? Maybe I misread this because it's definitely more hated than I thought it would be when I saw spoilers coming around. Now, for myself, I said Sophia Dogged Detective. Because I was like, oh, it's cute. A little dog commander that's not Ren and Siri. It'll be a fun thing to add in. I regret to inform you, I also do not have this deck built. And it's not for hatred amongst the community so much as it is from decision paralysis. So I actually did sit down and attempt to build this deck on Moxfield. As I'm sitting there, I go, okay, so do I want dogs? No, wait, but I could make artifact synergies because it lets me investigate and make clues. So I don't want more artifact stuff. Do I want dog stuff? Do I want, all these triggers? I could not define a particular path I wanted it to follow. So it ended up never making it off the shelf.
A classic case of decision paralysis or commander paralysis, 100%. Just leading to, it's never too late. You might revisit it in 20 years time, and maybe build it then.
Well, there's more dogs.
Finally.
But Modern Horizons 3, who is most likely to make it into your deck? Now that we've gone 0 for 1, both of us.
Yeah, so I've changed around a lot. I had a lot of commanders that I liked at the beginning that I wanted to build. I had a lot of commanders that I think are really cool that I might build. But one commander that I think is undeniably flying under the radar, but is really interesting and has cool art, is going to be Ginkgo the Future Shaper, which is 2, a white and a blue. It's a Moonfolk wizard, and whenever another non-token permanent you control leaves the battlefield, you can choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn, and you create a creature token with those characteristics. A 2/2 white fox with vigilance, a 1/2 blue Moonfolk with flying, and a 1/1 black rat with lifelink. And then on top of all that, you can pay 3, a blue and a white for a total of 5 to put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. So this is a fun blink outlet commander that is going to upgrade, any sort of Brago deck into something that's completely degenerate and to something that's super cute. I'm a token drawer. I like to draw my little tokens. I'm so excited to be, drawing rats, moonfolk, and foxes in a small army of each to boot, because you can do each of these once on everybody's turn on a turn cycle. So on a full 4 turns, you can make 12 interestingly different creatures, and if you have the mana for it, you can buff them up. So he's a 2/5 on top of that, so he's not dying to a lightning bolt. I think he's cool. I think he's fun, and nobody's gonna have a bad time when you sit down with a Ginkgo, except unless you're taking really long turns on other people's turns. So
which I think is probably the downside to this. Reads as blink commander that could take long turns, but as long as you're being cognizant of everyone's time, I think this is a lot of fun.
Precisely. That's a great way of putting it.
Now, for myself, I was like, ugh, other people have fun? Why? When I can grind them into dust.
Uh-huh.
This was okay. Let me phrase it like this. This was probably the first commander or one of the first commanders I saw spoiled from this set.
Uh-huh.
And I was sold from day one. That's Harrogast Erupting Nullkite.
Good choice.
So it is 9 colorless for a 6/6 Eldrazi dragon. Comes with Emerge for 6 and 2 red. So the Emerge is that you can sacrifice a creature and pay the Emerge cost reduced by the creature's mana value.
Uh-huh.
So for example, you could cast this for 6 red, and then if I were to sacrifice like a 3 mana creature, instead I'm paying 3 red. So I cheat this out. I'm basically never paying the 9 as long as I've got some sack fodder.
Yeah.
And then whenever you cast this spell, you can exile your hand, and if you do, you draw 3 cards. Comes with flying because it's a dragon. And then each creature spell you cast has Emerge, and the Emerge cost is equal to its mana value. So the thought here is that, or this is my thought, is I can build a nice deck where I can cheat out big creatures, and hopefully I've got some cool dies effects so that, okay, I'm sacking something that wants to die. And I sat there and actually did the math on it.
Uh-huh.
So as long as I have enough mana for the biggest creature that I want to have out, like let's just say I need 10 mana to get out some 10 mana creature.
Yeah.
I could gain 4 or 5 sacks as long as I had enough stuff in hand.
Uh-huh. With the Emerge.
With that 10 mana. Yeah, with the Emerge, I could just sit there and keep looping essentially and get out like multiple dies triggers per turn.
And then considering with Harrogast refilling your hand on cast, yeah, it's pretty spooky.
Yeah, I don't know where like fully I want to go with it besides, okay, get out a bunch of stuff I want to sack. In red, that might be a little difficult because usually black is your sack payoff colors, black or white. But I think it's a unique take, and I might be able to cheat out some Eldrazi goodness, maybe. This could be my Eldrazi cheaty deck.
This is a great spot for those big, bulky titans we were talking about earlier.
And it does count them as casting them, so I could get all those disgusting effects.
Yeah, good choice.
So I guess what we have to do now is circle back at Assassin's Creed next month or in Bloomborough in the beginning of August and see if we've actually taken the time to construct these. So you got about 6 weeks. Get your Ganku on, and I'll get my Harrogast going, and we'll see how it pans out.
Well, we'll see. Good challenge.
I think that wraps up the main conversation here. So let's do question of the week, card of the week, and then we're going to go get on out of here because I know this episode is running a little longer than normal, but sometimes they have to run a little longer than normal to get into the juice of the conversation.
Oh, yeah.
But this week's question of the week comes from our arch nemesis rival no, it actually comes from one of our good friends out on Twitter. This comes from Cody, who is the co-host of the Brew It or Screw It podcast. So if you guys enjoy our podcast and you enjoy Magic the Gathering podcast, feel free to check out Brew It or Screw It. They talk about different deck builds if they want to brew it or chuck it in the trash. But they do interesting deck builds. They do a lot of fan suggested deck builds. But he is here today in the capacity of asking us a question. And when I say here today, I mean here metaphorically because he's not physically here. Cody's question of the week. So he says, I've started tracking my games this year, and it's redefined how I feel about Commander games. What do you consider a good game of Commander? Is it getting the win, enjoying time with friends, seeing your deck do the thing, etc., etc.?
Yeah, so thanks, Cody. That's a great question. I have to refer you back to our, having a fun game podcast, because it's like at the end of the day, it comes down to what you personally enjoy and what you get out of Magic. And like as much I've called a hot take, but if what you like out of Magic is winning, you probably need to open up your mindset a little bit, because ideally in a Magic game, you're only winning, 25% of the games with your consistent 4-pod. Obviously there's variation there, and sometimes you're just on fire, and sometimes you just didn't shuffle well enough, and come on. But for the most part, I like to think that a game is fun if everybody gets a chance to do something, if everybody has a moment where they're involved in the storyline of the game. And so if that doesn't happen for somebody, I can imagine that they're not really having fun. Like if I play a game and I don't draw a red mana for, the entirety of my first 10 turns, the game's over in 10 turns, and I didn't even get to cast my commander or half the cards in my deck or something like that. And it's like, well, that wasn't really a satisfactory display of what my deck can do. And so I think everybody likes to have those moments where you're like, whoa, that's cool, or like, that's a cool combo. And obviously if you played a deck a lot, you probably aren't as excited by those combos, but just having a satisfactory play, or a moment that you stop something on the stack and that saves everybody else, like those, I enjoy those kind of legendary moments that you want to talk about while you're clinking brewskis together in 2 years time. So I like the weird, the cool and the weird.
No, and I think that impacts how you and I go about content creation too, right? Because one of the reasons we enjoy podcasting, or when we go to events, is kind of being able to tell those stories. So when we meet new players, or we meet new friends and we get down on the game, there's a lot of times you and I will sit down and I'll play a deck where you've seen it 10 times and you go, oh man, you should have seen this one time he played the deck and this crazy combo happened, or vice versa. Or you pull out a deck and I go, oh guys, we got to watch out because that deck is the threat, and da da da. And granted, a lot of it's just bluster where I'm working the table.
Yeah.
But being able to share those experiences and share those stories when you go into new groups, a lot of times is what helps build the early foundations and the bonds to then build up those groups where you can make those stories with them as well. For me, I think it's not just about winning. I don't even know if I win 25% of the time. I think I would be shocked if I won somewhere more than 10% of the time, to be honest with you. And that's because I don't necessarily play to win. Now, I play the game with a intent to win. Like, I'm not just sitting at the table spinning my wheels, but I will play with a strategy that has a win con. I'm not sitting down going like, man, if I don't win every game, my game night's ruined.
Right.
For me, a good game is on a personal level, or I'm sorry, as a deck performance level. For me, it's I want people to know my deck was there, right? Meaning I didn't just whiff and do nothing all game, but I made some tangible impact on the table. Whether that's passive damage through my Karavik deck, whether that's I convinced somebody to attack somebody else through my politicking. Somebody knows that Cory was in that 4-pod, for better or worse.
You contributed to the story of the game.
Yeah, exactly. You contribute to the story. So I think for me, my priority is going to be time with friends. And I'm okay, even if I'm the first person out and I'm fourth in every single pod, I'm okay as long as I meet those two conditions, right? Like my deck did something and everybody had a good time. And for me, everyone had a good time takes superiority over my deck did something, but ideally a good game of Commander for me is I do both.
Right. So
now, a great game of Commander for me is I'm like first or second, because then I played Magic to the very end of the game.
Yeah, I think it's always fun to stick around and kind of be in that deciding moment. The best way to die is everybody, you kill all three other players at once to kind of nullify anybody's bad feelings from not getting the chance to play Magic. But that's what it's all about. Like when you have a Commander night or you are at an LGS, like people are trying to squeeze in as many games as possible. And so you want to have those impactful, like high velocity games. Or maybe, your group prefers kind of that more battle cruisery style. So everybody has kind of what they prefer. And so I think, the most fun happens when everybody's conditions for having fun is met and the game is considered a net positive.
No, I agree. I think for me too, my fondest memories, and we're a little over a year into the podcast and into doing content creation in general.
Mm-hmm.
So we've gone to 3-4 events at this point in some kind of pseudo official capacity as a creator, right? Not necessarily like, people should line up and kiss the ring or whatever, but with the mindset of like, hey, I want to go and I'm going to kind of look at it on how can I advance the gathering. Because I think when you go in as a player, you're like, I'm gonna grind games. I'm gonna knock out games. I meet some cool people along the way. Bam, bam, bam.
Yeah.
But when you go in with a creator mindset, I think you kind of have a sense of responsibility to carry the torch that is inviting in new players, that is making sure everybody at the event is having a good time, stuff like that. My fondest memories are going to events this past year and being second place because I got into some struggle match, that it could have been a coin flip either way, and they happened to top deck the winning card, and I didn't have a response, and I ended up losing. And I'm okay with that because I knew that, hey, everybody had a blast and we took it down to the wire. My deck did the thing. Their deck did the thing. Everybody else had a good time.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think we have a very similar perspective on it. But, thank you so much, Cody, for reaching out and participating with the podcast. And Cory, if people have questions that they want to send, where can they send them?
Yeah, guys. So we always enjoy answering question of the week, obviously, or we wouldn't bring it up every single episode. But if you want to submit your question of the week, you can do so either in the comments of this video here, in the comments of any video, really. You can also leave comments on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, all the good stuff. You can also reach out to Cole or myself directly. Cole prefers his messages actually in a metal canister left on the moon. So if you know anybody who was on like Apollo 13 missions not Apollo 13 because they didn't go to the moon. That one, Tom Hanks survived. Just FYI, he made it. But any of the other Apollos that did make it to the moon, you can leave your question of the week up there, and Cole will eventually find it. Presumably with the moon folk that Genku is making.
Ooh, well, that's a great point. So send it to my my PO box, which is on a moon. Now, Cory didn't say which moon, but it is one of the many moons of Saturn. It's Titan.
Are you you're a Titan fan? I was going to ask, are you like an IO fan or?
Personally, with having 42 some odd moons, I think we're good with Titan. That's the only one I can name. I'm looking at this list. Phoebe.
Fair enough. Yeah, I believe it's Phoebe. Phoebe?
If it's spelled like the name Phoebe, which is pronounced Phoebe instead of Phoebe, but it is spelled Phoebe. So
yeah, because they're all named after Greek nymphs, I believe, on that one.
Well,
I got. Welcome to Astronomy Cast with your boy, your guide to the stars.
All right,
but hey, that's a question of the week. Cole, what do you got for card of the week? Is it also moon related?
Yeah, no, it isn't. But on a full moon, you might find me casting this card and howling the EdHcast cowl. But this card of the week is a blue and 2 mana for an enchantment aura called Amphibian Downpour. It's got flash, it's got storm, and it's got enchant creature. Enchanted creature loses all abilities and is a blue frog with base power toughness 1/1. So I just think this card is so funny because somebody has, a crazy big turn. They swing in for combat and you're like, what was your storm count again? I'm going to turn all of your biggest creatures into 1/1 blue frogs and, block them accordingly or don't block them accordingly to keep them from entering the graveyard. But turning a lethal swing into a lethal storm or a non-lethal storm of frogs seems like a very fun interactive spell, where it has you just itching for somebody to pop off. Oh, you cast, infinite spells. I might just be turning everybody's board into frogs. It's Ixodron, but with some conditions.
Actually, I really enjoy this when I saw this card as well. It's pretty much mass diminish, but more flavorful, I think. Because mass diminish turns everything 1/1 and gets rid of their abilities until end of turn. This one's even better because they're all frogs and they're permanently frogs because it's an aura, right? It's like
it's
making
aura,
copies of
yeah.
aura.
And so if you have anything that cares about like enchantments entering the battlefield as well, you can always this has, you know, applicative properties in an enchantress deck, like a Bant enchantress deck for sure.
See, it's good that this isn't in like black, because otherwise this would be like Toxrill staple that everyone learns to hate.
Well, if you're in my play group, I think you're gonna learn to hate this card too. So keep an eye out.
Spoiler alert. But hey guys, I think that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you for hanging out with us. Thank you for talking Modern Horizons 3. Thank you for listening. We do look forward to all your comments, all those comments, thumbs up, subscribes, all that good stuff. It does help us, and it helps like stoke the algorithm a little bit. So anything you guys can do to assist, we greatly appreciate. Once we get to, I think our goal is 200 subscribers on YouTube. We're at like 189 or so as we're recording this. I do want to do some kind of giveaway. I don't necessarily know what just yet, but I think Cole and I will put our heads together and we'll come up with something quite piquant to bring the Spanish back.
Well,
I think that's actually French, because picante is Spanish.
yeah, I'm like, all right, well.
See, I'm trilingual now. But if you guys want to reach out to us, you can find Cole at loveandmana.mtg or up on his moon base. Any of those locations are acceptable. You can reach out to me at Sleevecard, or you can reach out to the podcast directly at UrCastPod or contact.urcast@gmail.com. But thank you for making it to the end of today's episode. Have yourselves a magical Friday, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.